Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture Albion Never Dies. A little while ago on my podcast, I talked about GPT, and it turned out to be one of the more popular episodes. Lots of people messaged me about this. So I thought I'd just say, first of all, I was looking at GPT, not just because it's in the news, but also because my work is in academic publishing, and so lots of people are really interested in how good is this AI really. But actually, I just grabbed one of my nearest books, which was From Tailors with Love, and asked ChatGPT to tell me about the two authors. Now, it did identify them correctly as the authors of that book. However, it started to give more and more detail, and this detail, when I checked it with the authors, was wrong. Because, of course, ChatGPT is a prediction machine. It tells you what it thinks is the most likely next word in a sentence. It's not checking against any kind of database, but I find it interesting because it can tell you what is most likely to be thought about a thing. And by the way, I did do some ego surfing, ego googling. I did ask it about myself, and it has absolutely no knowledge of me, so that put me in my place. But I did ask it about the top 10 topics of British culture. I'm looking at a computer screen right here, and the first thing it came out with was food. I thought that's really interesting. The first thing people think about when they talk about British culture is food. As I've travelled around the world, British food seems to have this, first of all, this terrible reputation. People say, oh yeah, British food, it's terrible. And yet when I ask them, okay, so what are these dishes? Have you tried them? They might think, oh, fish and chips. Have you ever tried it? Some people, if they've only really tried it in London, might not like it so much. Any major capital city, you're likely to find a tourist trap, a place that's overpriced. But if they've tried it in most of the UK, most other places, then generally they'll like it. Certainly I've been to, say, Whitby, and the fish and chips there are fantastic. It's where the white fish fleet used to go out from to get the cold water fish, and they are really good and really fresh, so I really like it. Equally, the English breakfast or afternoon tea. These things are really popular when people try them, and of course there's a whole slew of modern chefs abounding on TV. I sometimes wonder if it's the British self-deprecating humour that's led to this. It's become a common point for us to joke about ourselves, or maybe it's because, American GIs posted here during the Second World War, when this country was being bombed, when this country had food rationing. Maybe that led to something of a reputation in the US, and then US culture tends to spread. So I'm wondering if that's partly it. I'm not sure if it's something that used to be true and is no longer true, or maybe it was never true. I'm not sure. But the second point that it talked about was the British monarchy. That certainly is unusual around the world, or let's say even specifically just Western Europe. There's not many great monarchies left. No particular disrespect there to the King of Sweden, but I think it's fair to say there's not many well-known royal families around the world. Yes, the Japanese have them, yes, the Spanish have them, but when people say the royal family, even if they're not British, they normally mean the British royal family. The third thing was British literature, and I was quite pleased that came so high up. I think there's many great works of English literature, specifically, say, The Lord of the Rings, of course Shakespeare. You have to say Shakespeare at this point. But then it said music, and again, the Beatles are often said to be the best band ever. There are those that disagree, but they are widely recognised as being highly influential on modern pop music, and not just in the West, but around the world. British sports, well, that's definitely something that we've impacted the world, or at least the UK's codification of certain sports. So it's the version of football that we wrote down, or soccer, that has travelled around the world. That's the thing. If you're British, then you can take pride that you've invented sports that everybody wants to play, which almost guarantees will never win, as opposed to the Americans who've invented sports that nobody wants to play, which guarantees they will always be world champions. So what was the next thing? Yeah, number 6, British TV and film. Well, of course, I've covered many James Bond topics. I once did a piece on satire specifically, and I got more messages than almost anything else I've ever done, with people saying, oh, but you didn't do Monty Python, or you didn't do this, or didn't do that, and so on. I was surprised how many people outside the UK could name so many different, specifically, comedies. So, number 6, British TV and film. Number 7, British comedies. 8, British festivals and traditions. There are many traditions in the UK. It's hard to narrow down one. I would suggest like the 1940s weekend that's up in Haworth, close to where I live, which also ties into literature. It's where the Bronte sisters lived. That's a fantastic festival. I think when it's the summer, we just have to make the most out of it. We have to do some really cool events just to get you out of home. The British accent and dialects, yep, for such a small country, it is amazing how many different accents and dialects there are. It is impressive. There's a map of the UK of accents that you can genuinely tell where people are from, and I think that makes it really difficult. Say when American actors try to do a British accent, it can sound very obviously fake to British people because it is so localised, it has so many connotations of class and education and life journey. It's a lot easier, it seems, for British people to do an American accent than for an American to do a British accent. Also to do with familiarity, I would suggest. Not to suggest there aren't a wide variety of American accents, but as I say, the British Isles is comparatively small and has so many different local accents. Number 10, I was so surprised, this was the last thing on the list. Number 10 was British history. Many people might put that as number 1, and maybe that shows that ChatGPT is not so reliable. As I say, this list comes from ChatGPT, so tell me what you think. Do you think this is an okay list? What would you add? What would you take away? If you want my thoughts in greater detail, of course, there's the podcast link below, but I'm very, very interested to know, what do you think of ChatGPT's top 10 list of British culture?